Thank you for joining us on another edition of Against the Current. I'm Dan Proft, coming to you live atop the Old Republic building in downtown Chicago at the well-appointed Skyline Club. My guest this week is Javier Salas, a media personality for the last 2 decades in Chicago, mostly on Spanish radio and television, who has chosen to leave those cushy media jobs that we all covet and run for Congress in the Democrat primary against none other than El Gallito, Luis Gutierrez. Javier Salas, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, thank you so much for having me.
I spent 20 years in politics to get out and get one of these phony baloney media jobs that you had for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
You spent 20 years doing media, and you decide for some ungodly reason to get into politics as a candidate for office. This is your first foray running in this
first
primary?
Time ever, yes.
Primary against Gutierrez?
Right.
So why are you doing it? You mad at your money?
No, not absolutely not. I still love radio. I did a couple of years on TV too, and I was a columnist for all newspaper, and I had to leave everything because, you know, you're not supposed to be running and be working on media. I think that's a really unfair rule, by the way.
Right.
But
only incumbent politicians get to not do their job and run. Everybody else has to do their job unless you're independently wealthy while you try and run for
Absolutely.
office.
But if you remember, my show was always about empowering the community politically, socially. Was always helping implementing programs to help the community, either health, fighting violence, especially immigration. I was a big advocate for immigrant rights. I was one of the organizers back in 2006, 2007 of the marches that trickled down in many other marches around the United States. And it was pretty much the first modern immigration movement here in Chicago. It was born here. And as you can remember,
that 2006 rally, that was hundreds of thousands of people.
Absolutely.
It was huge.
It was several marches. Then 2007 we repeated. And then I stopped. I see that we were going nowhere. But you should remember that it was kind of interesting because it was radio who motivated all these people to come out of the shadows. Right. There was no Facebook or Twitter, nothing like that. It was just the radio, TV, magazines. They didn't help us at all. I was always, every time I remember I went to the radio station, I was afraid they were going to fire me because there was not like a line between, you're supposed to help people like that. No, we were doing this without permission. You know, it was very interesting times.
Well, and so what made you decide to leave, though, to take on this challenge against Gutierrez? Because what you're talking about now, immigrant rights and the rallies, I mean, this is what Gutierrez is known for. This is the only time he gets press is when he's railing against the Republicans or Kate Steinle's father, or even President Obama, saying that he doesn't like immigrant enforcement. He wants immigration reform tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, this seems to be his issue. So, how do you distinguish yourself if that's what also motivating you into the race?
Well, don't let me forget what you're asking me about. Talking about President Obama. Obama has been the mayor deporter of Latinos. Remember, more than George W. Bush. He alone has deported close to 3 million people in the last 6 years or 7 years. And the chief of staff who started all it was Rahm. So that's a whole different
Whatever happened
point
to
that
Rahm
I would like to talk about it.
I know he was the chief of staff.
He was the chief of staff 2009 to 2010.
Whatever happened to him?
He became a mayor of Chicago.
Oh, that's right. Yes, that's right.
He decided all of a sudden to move back to Chicago.
Yes.
Maybe he missed the cold weather.
That's right. No. But on Gutierrez and the issue of immigration, I mean, are there differences of opinion on that issue between you and him?
Oh, absolutely. Now let's step back a little bit. We, the Latino community, we care for many other issues other than immigration. Immigration is the only issue that Luis has been speaking about 22 years now, and that's the only issue he talks nationally on TV, on radio, in any place. He's always the face of immigration, and he has done a wonderful job of portraying himself like the leader. But the Latino community are not fools. We have many other problems, and especially in the 4th District, where I've been living since I arrived from Mexico 25 years ago, we have had so many changes. We have gentrification happening in the 4th District. We have so many other issues that they need to be taken care of. And when I spoke about it on the radio, I could tell the little attention that our congressman in Washington, he wasn't doing anything. We didn't see any leadership on education, on job creation, and economical development, absolutely nothing. So it was until I became a senior advisor for Governor Pat Quinn about 2.5 years ago. that he asked me if I wanted to be a senior advisor for Latino affairs to help him implementing programs and reach out to the different communities in the state of Illinois, be a surrogate, that kind of job. It was when I realized how important it was to be on a table where decision making is happening. It was when I realized, because I was part of several decisions with Governor Quinn, that if I wasn't there, the Latino community wouldn't even receive the same amount of money for programs, like after-school programs, for example, things like that. So I realized that not only we lack leadership in the state, but also in Washington. And when we have a person that is just talking about one only issue, doesn't produce absolutely anything good for the community. We're lacking better education, we're lacking in job creation. So I thought it was time for me to challenge.
What about even on that one issue that he's known for? When he refers to the Kate Steinle murder by a person who is in this country illegally for the fifth or sixth time as a quote-unquote little thing. When he says of Republicans who opposed the DACA program back in 2014, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, right? It's particularly those that were coming from Central America kind of en masse, and we didn't have any obvious place to put them, and they weren't being checked. I mean, kind of the same conversation we're having today about Syrian refugees, or the prospect of Syrian refugees. And when he says of Republicans, it is almost as though they despise and hate, redundant, it is almost as though they despise and hate all of our children. Is that, even on that issue of immigration and trying to rethink our national immigration policy, does that put Luis Gutierrez in a place where he is going to be a leader on actually producing a result when you're demonizing people who have disagreements with you, even people like me who are completely open to kind of rethinking how we do immigration, but we may have some differences of opinion on the structure and the processing and so forth. So on that issue, that's his signature issue. When he makes statements like that, how does he advance the flag for immigration reform?
Absolutely nothing. You're right. Demonizing the Republican Party is very easy for any Democrat, and I truly believe that we need to retake the beginning of the conversation with the Republican Party if we really want to achieve something on the national level. Here at the state level, we need to work with the Republicans if we want to achieve advancements in education and jobs, even on immigration, the benefits or advantages, whatever these are, or whatever these are going to be proposing once I get to be the congressman. In reference of the tragic case of this young lady from California who was killed by an illegal immigrant.
Steinle, right.
Or undocumented immigrant. I think it's very tragic, but that just goes to show you how out of touch Luis is. Not only in that case, that it was very unfortunate that he expresses himself like that. And that's not the first thing that he said that he says something like that. He also says that Jesus Christ was Latino. I don't know if you remember that. So
he can worship whatever Jesus
because
Christ
his name was
wants.
Jesus.
It's fine. Yes.
So that's why he was a Latino.
Yes, sure, I got it.
I remember he saying that. So it's totally out of touch. I mean, I think he's very comfortable that he knows that there is not going to be opposition, there's not going to be a person running against him, that he can get away with anything. And unfortunately, he probably thought that he could get away with those phrases. Good thing that it was taped. It was in Spanish, I believe, and somebody translated it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, at least if I remember correctly. So very unfortunate, just out of touch. Yeah, that's all.
So Victor Davis Hanson, writing in Pajamas Media this week, kind of noted historian and deep thinker on policy issues like this. He had a piece where he describes wise and suicidal immigration policy. And he starts out by saying, that America is the nation of immigrants that we always talk about that it is, and it's worked tremendously well. But it's worked tremendously well the closer we've abided 4 principles that drive immigration policy. The 4 principles. 1, people come here legally in the first place. You don't start your arrival into a new country by being here illegal, because that leads you to do other illegal things. So I'm here illegally, now I got to get a false ID, a social security card, so forth. Number 2, it should be blind and diverse. When you kind of pick pockets or you focus everything on, just immigrants from Mexico, and you either want to open the borders or you want to shut them all out, it achieves the same problem, or it generates the same problem, I should say, and it doesn't. It prevents us from achieving blind and diverse immigration. People that have a certain psychographic, in other words, they want to come to this country to build a better life. That's why they want to come, and I don't care if they're coming from Poland or Mexico or wherever. Number three, that immigrants come in manageable numbers. And they come in manageable numbers rather than just kind of en masse like we see Syrian refugees in Germany and all the problems that have been associated with that. So that you can Americanize. Both the immigrants that are coming want to Americanize, to assimilate, regardless of country of origin, and our national interest is such that they come here and they assimilate. Those four principles should drive immigration policy, is the argument that Victor Davis Hanson advances, and I find that argument pretty persuasive.
I guess it would be in an ideal world, in Victor's world, right?
Well, I mean,
but
right.
It's not reality. It's not what's happening. And
Well, I know it's not what's happening, but I guess if you have a problem with any of those principles, what are the principles that should drive the policy choices we make in terms of this amorphous phrase that everybody bandies about, immigration reform?
Well, I believe that we have a big problem on immigration that it needs to be solved and it needs to be addressed. We are. And I consider myself, I'm never going to deny it, I am an immigrant myself, and I came to this country to progress, to have a better job, and to have a better life. And I don't think that that people who wants to achieve the American dream, just like everybody else, should be denied of that. You're saying that they should come legally. Well, if there was a way to come legally, people will do it more often. But there is no way. When we talk about fixing our immigration system, people just say that because everybody's saying that. But fixing the immigration system means that you need to be able to create more visas and more possibilities for people to arrive in the legal way. There is absolutely no people trying to wait online. Like
there are some people waiting in line. I mean, there are some people people do legally emigrate to this country. That does happen on an annual basis. That's real. The question is, I think a legitimate question is to say, is that process too long and too cumbersome and too redundant, such that we know that Javier, who's waiting in line, wants to come to this country to build a better life for himself. He's going to be a great American citizen, and it shouldn't take him a decade to get in here. I think that's a legitimate point. But the idea that nobody comes here legally, well, that's not true. People come here legally. And then, of course, all kinds of people come here illegally as well. I mean, now, if you wanted to say, for example, you can come here, anybody who wants to come here can come here so long as they waive all transfer benefits, so that we know, by definition, because you're waiving access to transfer benefits, to government benefits, that you're here to build a better life for yourself, no matter what that struggle looks like. Well, that's a way to maybe expedite the process, right? To make sure that what you're saying is actually the case, because you don't have access to the fallback.
Right.
I'm just saying that's one idea. I'm not saying that's the panacea, but it seems to me that that's the conversation we should have, and the vetting process as well, which is very important.
Well, especially nowadays.
Yes.
Nowadays, because we're talking about Syrian people coming into the United States. We're talking about the possible terrorism who will be coming through our borders. And let's remember, 9/11 happens with people who came from the Canada border, not necessarily from the Mexican border.
Or people that come here and overstay their visas.
Absolutely, we need to work very hard on the screening.
But that also relates to not just to radical Islamic terror. It also relates to terrorism on the streets of urban centers like Chicago, because you have people coming from Central American countries that have pretty violent cartel and gang problems to exacerbate the violent gang and cartel problems we already have here.
But not necessarily. Then I disagree with you in that point, because last year I had the opportunity to visit one of the centers. We have 9 centers which takes refugee Central American people. During last year, massive migration from these kids, and not necessarily their kids. They were like grown-ups too, but not necessarily they're criminals. They were refugees too. They were running away from crime and violence.
Sure.
And some of them who has been deported back, they have been killed by the same maras, gangs, and everything. It's a problem. Maybe it's not.
Right. But I mean, so you're telling me that the El Chapo's cartel doesn't have operatives inside these borders? You're telling me that MS-13 doesn't have operatives inside these borders?
I'm sure, and they like the sleeping cells, right? That the terrorist has. Yeah, I'm sure that happened, and we know there is a special police reports that we have in the suburbs, we have in the city, some of the Chapo people. Well, my point here is that we cannot have a double standard. Like hoping to bring all these people from Syria that so far have been like 150 persons last year. It hasn't been that many.
Not yet.
Well,
right.
And we take the Syrians, but no, we don't take the Central American people when they're refugees, also running away from violence and from death and from being raped.
Well, I agree. I
guess we need to treat them all equally. And,
I agree, and I think the equality in treatment is, can we verify who this person is so we have a good idea of why this person wants to come into this country? It is a very different thing to know someone is coming from Mexico with their family in tow. Usually. I know who this person is. He was working in Mexico, and he wants to work in the United States with his family and bring his family along so he can have a better life. Versus somebody, whether it's somebody from El Salvador, who's got all kinds of jailhouse tats, and she's coming alone, or it's somebody from Syria who we have no paperwork on and no idea.
But not everybody's like that. That's,
I know.
I think it's a stereotype.
No, but I'm distinguishing. I'm saying it's not a stereotype because I'll concede the point that the vast majority of people that want to come here would be law-abiding, would be productive citizens. I'll concede the point. This is not all or nothing. What I'm saying is the equality in terms of the standard is, can we verify who this person is and what their intentions are?
Well, if you remember last year during the detention centers when they arrived, because they arrived and they said, "I'm here. Please help me."
Right.
They didn't cross the border and look a job like my Mexican paisanos did.
Yes, that's right.
They were not looking for jobs. They were
a lot of them are kids.
Please help us. Yes. So they were detained. They were treated. They given medicine. They given education, and some of them they were sent to several states on the United States. Some of them came to Illinois. So
I was part of relatives and so forth.
I was part of the team from Governor Pat Quinn who sent us to take care of this situation.
Okay.
And I was able to visit the same center that Senator Mark Kirk and Senator Durbin visited at the time. We have 9 of those centers here, and it was very dramatic. I mean, to see the experience, to see these people there, babies having babies there, basically. And, but they were looking for their family members, and none of them are from Illinois, Dan. Many of them, they went to Atlanta. Many of them, they live in La Florida, in Miami. So, but it was very interesting, the dynamic. And now this year is not as many, but we still be cautious of what's happening and trying to be humane and treat them in the humane way, in my opinion.
Well, right, and I think this is where there's a commonality. Every human being, their life, a life of some kid coming from Central America is just as valuable as my life. Right. Every human being deserves to be treated with dignity. We are an empathetic people, and we should be. We should be a compassionate people, but we also need to be a sensible people. And I think this is what kind of Victor Davis Hanson and others have been suggesting is, if we have no idea, and we have terrorist organizations, just to use the ISIS example and the Syrian refugees as an example.
Okay, 9/11.
Yeah, well, 9/11 is an example, but even just right in real time, saying, here's how you get in, here's how you embed yourself. We have, as you see playing out in real time in European countries, Germany, Sweden, all the Syrian refugees are 18 to 35 single males. That maybe is something where you want to say, if I don't know who these people are, this is a concern. And then when I see what happens in Cologne on New Year's Eve and other German cities and Sweden at a festival for young women last summer, and the police are covering these things up because we don't want to foment anti-immigrant. I mean, it's one of these things where we can't have a sensible conversation because everybody wants to erect their straw mans. Either these stereotypes about people from a particular country, or these stereotypes about people who are saying something on the order of what I'm saying is like, I'm anti-immigration, or I'm racist, or whatever. And it's just all silliness. We're saying immigration is a good thing, so long as we know who's coming in and what their intentions are, and then go forth and prosper. Let 1,000 flowers bloom wherever those flowers come from. And it doesn't seem like we ever get to that conversation so we can say, what should the U.S. immigration system look like? How should it function? What should be the backstops and the redundancies to make sure it is as close to perfection as we can make it? Because people's lives are on the line. Our national security is on the line. Just ask those victims in San Bernardino and the female shooter who came over here on a legitimate fiancé visa. So is that a fair point that I raise?
Well, I believe you have very fair points, Dan. Nevertheless, I still believe that whatever this system is going to be in the future, and if I had the opportunity to become a congressman, I want to be addressing issues like to put together a fair system or suggest ideas to put a fair system for everybody else. You mentioned DACA a few minutes ago. You mentioned, probably you didn't mention DAPA, but these programs that President Obama put in place, we're the Latino community, the immigrant community in general, we're about to lose that opportunity. It's not going to happen this year, and the implementation of DAPA, which is DACA for the parents, probably we're not going to have it. It's not going to happen. So we're going to go back again to the starting point. And but to me, it's very important to have a different perspective, different block, different strategy in Washington. Luis Gutierrez has been doing this over and over for 22 years, and I think it's a time for change. It's a time for communication with the other party, the other members of the party, understanding, compromise. I think that's a very important. That's where we need to start then. No matter how the system is going to look like, but we need to do it together.
Speaking of Luis Gutierrez and where there are points of departure between the two of you, you issued a statement this week calling on Gutierrez to decouple himself from Rahm Emanuel. Gutierrez, for all of his high-minded rhetoric and for kind of what he does, criticize President Obama a little bit to give the appearance that he is just focused on the issue and he's not playing politics. Well, it turns out he is playing politics because he supports Rahm Emanuel, and he still supports Rahm Emanuel after everything that's happened in the last 3 months.
Absolutely. We need to see the whole context. Rahm and Representative Gutierrez were enemies a few years ago. Rahm was the brains behind all the deportation programs that started with President Obama. And everybody's blaming Obama, but it wasn't Obama, basically. It was Rahm Emanuel. So the Latino community and the immigrant community knows that. So how can you understand, or how can you explain that 2 years ago, Rahm Emanuel is all of a sudden the best friend of all immigrants, and Luis Gutierrez is there to testify that he isn't really a changed man, and that he's the best thing that it could happen to Chicago immigrants? That's totally, it doesn't make any sense. And the community knows that. And that was one of the reasons also that inspired me to become a runner for Congress, because I was like, what a phony guy, because it's like, how could you be backing someone who has, in our opinion, damaged the Latino community and the immigrant community in general? Not only that, but now you're saying that Rahm is like is a great person that is not at all. We didn't even know about Laquan McDonald.
Yeah,
That's a whole different thing.
Well, this is back in the 2015 election.
Right.
So he's in a runoff with Chuy Garcia.
Sure.
And where does Rahm fall?
Right. So, and
I mean, where does Gutierrez fall? He falls in with Rahm.
Right. And he was his co-chair for the election to 2015. Remember, you see him on TV. He was very present, very much present on TV.
He was wearing his Mr. Rogers sweater just like Rahm was.
Absolutely, introduced him. And he was representing all the Latino community. I don't know why. I don't know who named him, representative of the Latino community. And so what I did was that Luis Gutierrez withdrew his support from Anita Alvarez, the state attorney. And a few days later, I said, Luis, why don't you do the same for Rahm? Because Rahm is the one who has been failing all minorities in general, but more importantly, he has been failing in trust. We don't trust him, because we need to finish the investigation. And so far, you need to show that you don't support him, like you did at the beginning of the election. He never responded. But now, little later, we learned why. After the Sun-Times released all these emails, no, actually, under Rahm Emanuel's office released all these emails, and sometimes wherever we check them out on the Sun-Times, we realized that Luis Gutierrez was really working together in the damage control message towards media. and that his team and Rahm's team were talking, and they were exchanging a lot of emails, and he did a lot of damage control. Now you tell me, as a congressman, is that part of responsibility? My responsibilities? When I went to the Congress to become the congressman, I'm gonna have to defend the mayor.
Right.
It's like, why are
Right.
you doing that, Luis? Nobody else did it. No, Jan Tchaikovsky, quickly. Nobody else. Just Luis. Why?
Right. And
It's very
so,
interesting.
so when people do things that seem to be irrational, who are otherwise rational, self-interested actors, there's usually a rational reason why they're doing it. And so it seems to me the only rational reason that Gutierrez would defend a mayor so unpopular, particularly in the last 3 months, but unpopular in the Latino community going back to the 2015 election, especially when he's running against Chewy in the general election. It seems to me that the only thing that makes sense is if Luis Gutierrez has some personal, financial, or political interest in Rahm Emanuel's survival.
Probably. I don't understand that, and I don't understand either. Also, not that he shouldn't respect him, but his very big love for Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House. I don't know if you agree or not, but Luis called him the smartest Republican, the smartest man in the Republican Party.
That is not.
And that is
not an endorsement a lot of Republicans are looking for from Luis Gutierrez.
Absolutely.
Just by the way.
But everybody was surprised why he had to speak about that. It's like it's like totally out of touch. Why do we care if you really like Paul Ryan? Why did he have to do the endorsement? It was around the same time that he did this for Rahm Emanuel.
Yeah, but the Rahm thing is so much more interesting because of Chicago.
Right.
And because of the 4th District, and because of the sizable Latino community here, and because of Rahm's unbelievable unpopularity.
Yes, but my point is that he's totally out of touch. It's like, why is he doing these kind of things? You know, going back to the Rahm issue. I mean, the fact that he defended him with so much passion all of a sudden, that he is his best friend, and then he turned his back to Chuy Garcia, this candidate that is very well known in the Latino community, very well liked, and a lot of people love him very much, and turned his back to him, calling him my little brother. I like him, but I told him I promised Rahm I was going to support him, knowing that all the Latino community were going to see that as a
So is this a story of
betrayal?
Yeah, well, right. So is this a story where Gutierrez is just another cog in the Chicago Democrat power structure that has lorded over the city, this kind of ruling class that has lorded over the city for the last 100 years? I mean, is that basically it? And he saw Chuy Garcia as a nice guy. He's a Latino, but you know what? I don't think he's going to win, and so my interests are served by continuing to sidle up to the power structure.
But once again, because he's very comfortable, don't you agree? He feels very comfortable in his position.
Yeah, in his position in Congress, so he thinks he can act with impunity.
Nothing happens, so we'll continue in here. Who knows? Probably he was looking for some other opportunity in the future. Who knows?
Well, and so with respect to Gutierrez, then, thinking about the situation locally, I mean, I know this is a local matter largely, but I mean, you know, people don't necessarily distinguish with respect to their representatives. You know, when we talk about the Chicago police, that's not my congressman's job. It's my alderman's job. It's maybe to some extent tangentially, it's my state legislator's job, mayor's job. With respect to the police and the relationship between the police and the Latino community, that's got to be odd for them to see their congressman standing with Rahm Emanuel amid all of the controversies, not just about Laquan McDonald, and not just about Philip Coleman,
right?
Not just about what happened over the holidays with Betty Jones and LeGrier and those police-involved shootings, but also just the idea that, man, this is somebody that as you said, he killed immigration reform when President Obama was first elected and had control of Congress. And he's been largely antagonistic to the interests of my family and the community to which I affiliate ethnically for the 5 years he was a mayor, and even prior to that in his previous posts. And I see my congressman propping him up. There's something that doesn't register.
Absolutely. No, I agree. It's something really that is hurting the community. Now that you mentioned the case of the police, let me remind you that the Latino community has had these cases too, just like the Laquan McDonald.
Sure.
And I remember when I was on radio, you know who was the first person asking for Anita Alvarez resignation? It was me then. But back in the year, it was when Lagunas and Flores. Remember these two kids from Cicero who were killed by a police officer
I
who
do
was
remember
drinking?
that. Yes.
John Ardelean.
Right.
He was
Hey,
drinking
what,
on Thanksgiving, 2008.
And he like blew through a stop sign or something?
Yeah, something,
right.
something
yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
And he smashed his truck on his car and he killed him. Then the hearings came back, and the police officer, they were so intimidating to the whole families of Lagunas and Flores. And Nancy Flores, one of the sisters of one of the guys, used to come to my show and talk to me about it all the time, and it was so scary. But back then it was Daley, the one who was the mayor, and Anita Alvarez defending the police or trying to clear everything up. But she didn't do anything, and we were so mad, we were so angry. And back then, I used to ask, where are the politicians? Where is Luis Gutierrez? Where is Danny Solis? Where is everybody who's not complaining about Anita Alvarez? Back in that year, nobody said anything, not even Chuy. Now everybody is doing it. It's so popular to, Anita Alvarez needs to quit, and nobody votes for her, and blah, blah, blah. But back in the year, where were they? I was the only one talking about it. So we have the Latino community. In other words, what I'm trying to express here is that the Latino community has had these cases, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to do what the African American community is doing.
Although
complain, to contest and everything. We haven't done that because of lack of leadership.
Well, I agree. I think that's right. But also, interestingly, you have the same problem because, I mean, if you look at it with respect to Rahm and the black community, who's really stepping out on Rahm right now? So you talked about everybody being silent on Daley. I mean, you got a couple of legislators who filed that recall bill. Where are all the minority aldermen? Where are all the minority state legislators? They are nowhere to be found. They're quiet as church mice.
Right.
So, I mean, you still have the same thing. Anita Alvarez is easy to discard.
Right now, right.
Right? But Rahm, and who really is the representative of that Chicago Democrat power structure, nobody wants to cross him yet, even in his current debilitated state, even with the police having the lowest morale that they've had in forever, according to the FOP president. I mean, it's very interesting how quiet everybody becomes. And what they'll do is, and you've probably experienced this, going back to the 2008 incident you're describing. Yeah, you know, you're right. I agree with you. I'll whisper to you in hushed tones in the corner of some building that I agree with you, and then I'll scurry away. The last thing I'm going to do, the last thing most of these people do, and I'm talking about the elected leaders, is stand up and be held to account in a public setting. And that, to me, really is what separates leaders from those that are complicit with this kind of conspiracy to destroy Western civilization that's going on in Chicago.
And we are in big need of doing or having those leaders then, and that's one of the reasons I'm running for Congress, because I guess we need to start at the top too and show leadership with the community. Listen, what you're saying about talking secretly, I have many Latino politicians who tell me,
I'm with you, Javier.
I'm so excited about you doing that. Would you come out and press and the press conference? No, I can't. And you know what happened to? That happened to Chuy too. You know, it's Chuy was never supported by any Latino politician. Everybody was with Rahm. I mean, the only one who supported was Rick. But you know, Rick and Munoz and Chuy, they're very good friends, and they work together in many other instances. But the same is happening with me. Everybody loves the fact that I'm running against Luis, but nobody wants to show support. But that's okay, as long as the people is the most important here, because they are the ones who vote. And in the district, I'm very well known. So it's
what's funny. You know what's funny. This is so interesting because I've run for office myself terribly. So it's too bad you're not running against me. You'd be a shoo-in. It's easy. I'd be a walkover. But also all the candidates that I've consulted over the years of being in this kind of wired universe of Illinois and Chicago politics. It happens to every candidate. It happened to me, and I knew it would happen to me, but you never know who falls on which side of the ledger. And the ledger I'm talking about is you get in, you run for office, and you think, okay, here's like all the people that'll support me. I know these people do this, and these other people contribute that. And what invariably happens is people that you thought would be heroes for you would go to the mat for you, you could rely on. disappear. And so that's one thing. But the other thing is people you didn't expect anything of, or you maybe never even met until you became a candidate for office,
Right.
become heroes for you. And it's so interesting. It's such a clarifying event
Sure.
when you think, here are my friends and these are my reliable partners in this that disappear, and here's some other people I expected nothing of, and they become my reliable partners.
right.
It's just such an interesting kind of sociological experiment, and
Right.
I'm sure you're already going through it now, but
Not only-
you're going to go through it between now and March.
Not only with friends, with family too.
Yeah.
It happens with family. You
Yeah.
have family members who disagree with you running, or they're on the other party and they don't help you. And they come on, give me $500. I need money. I don't have money.
Right.
I want to help you. It's surprising, absolutely. To me, it has been a wild ride, and learning for first time and running an election. And as I was telling you the other day, getting on the ballot, to me it was like an election before the election. I never imagined how hard it was
Sure.
to get so many signatures, and then be under the premise of I'm going to be challenged and he's going to kick me out of the ballot, because he always did that to everybody who was his opponent, and that's why in many occasions he ran unopposed.
And you're
but
also
not this time.
And you're also finding out how unglamorous running
It
for
is.
office is.
It is.
Right?
It is. Knocking doors, getting signatures. It's not an easy task. And believe me, I'm very humble to learn everything I learned.
Now, here's the other thing that happens, and I will tell you, it doesn't happen immediately, but it happens through the course of the campaign. As soon as you announce that you're running for office and you're officially on the ballot, you lose 40 IQ points. So you just be careful about that. They just they start to shed, because you say, well, I can't dress like I normally used to dress. I have to think about the shirt I'm wearing, and I have to think about what I'm saying, and you start to kind of lose your own identity. So don't do that. Resist the temptation to be someone different than you were for the last 25
right.
years. Just if not, you may not like Donald Trump, and I don't really like Donald Trump, but if there's one lesson he has taught all kinds of candidates is be yourself when you enter politics. Be the same person you were on the day before you entered the race, because you never know. People might actually like you, or
Right.
they may despise you. But at least you're yourself, and you don't have to think about this tie goes with that shirt, and so it's just kind of fascinating. But I want to stick on go back to police for a second, because this is such a salient issue. I mean, right? And as a member of Congress, you deal with this to some extent because of federal funds that redound to local police forces and the like. In addition, too, it's just the idea that the first responsibility of government, physical security of your constituents. And your constituents live in this community, so that's your first responsibility. And so the story out this week that police stops down 80% in the first 2 weeks of 2016, even though shootings are up 200%. Murders
That's right.
are up over 100% compared to this time last year. So we had the so-called Ferguson effect. Now we have the tiny dancer effect, where Chicago police morale is at all-time low, and they're essentially kind of afraid to do their job.
Right.
And that puts a whole host of your constituents in a very bad place in terms of their physical security.
Well, we need the reform, and we need the reform really quick. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we really need to be talking about it. We really need to support the idea of having also conversation with the police. We should never stop talking to the police. I mean, nothing stops us from doing that. I mean, I remember living in Irving Park all my life, well, the last 15 years. We have had several meetings with the cops there, and we know some of the captains there and everything, and that's a good beginning. I don't know how long this is going to continue. I don't know if Rahm is going to quit. Hopefully, is whatever the people want him to be. But,
Do you think he should resign?
I think he should resign after the fact that he tells us how the $5 million were agreeing in payment to the mother of Laquan McDonald's. We haven't been clear on that. We need to understand who gave the order, or just both. Yes, and you don't need to see the video, and you don't need to ask questions. If we don't find out what happened to those 80 minutes of video from the Burger King who supposed to be recorded, the whole crime, the whole everything, we need to find those things. And after that, then he can quit, or he can resign. But I wouldn't like to see him leaving right now and then washing his hands like I have absolutely nothing to do. I don't know, for some reason I think that's
But
like him to see him.
But you're not desirous of him to be the mayor of Chicago for very much longer.
Well, absolutely. I think we need new leadership. Just like in Congress, we need new people, new fresh start with the city of Chicago.
And with respect to the police too, it's one of those things that, look, there are problems with the police, and there are some bad actors in the police force, but I think it's a fraction, a tiny fraction of the 13,000 Chicago police officers. And so I think you need to keep a sense of proportion, and if there's processes that don't provide for bad cops to be removed from the street, removed from their job, prosecuted if they commit criminal acts, then those processes need to be changed. But everybody, whether you're white, black, Latino, they still want that 911 call responded to when they make it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I agree. It's something that we need. But once again, I think right now we are in the position that we need to start talking, especially minorities. The minorities, African American, Latinos, we need to find ways to understand each other. As you can see, all the protesters right now mostly are African American. You see very few Latinos in it.
Right.
We need to start also to understanding each other, because if we have another Laquan McDonald, we have another Flores and Lagunas, and if we don't support each other to make things happen, to change things, we don't know if Rahm is going to quit or not. We don't know if he's going to be fired or not. I guess everything starts with communication among Latinos and minorities, but also with the police.
Now, one other issue, it's a local issue, but we have a U.S. Department of Education, and that's the quality of K through 12 education in the city of Chicago, in the Chicago public school system, in the 4th Congressional District. What do we do about a system where we keep pouring more and more money into it? CPS is junk rated and functionally bankrupt. We're on the precipice of the possibility of another teacher strike. And it turns out, as you know, CPS is disproportionately minority, and those minority families are not getting access to the kind of schools that Rahm Emanuel gets access to for his kids.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And one of the issues that it was constantly brought up every time I talked to the community in the 4th District when getting the signatures, that wasn't radio when I was with Governor Quinn. It was about the inequality in the classes, in the classrooms. I mean, the big number of kids in one room, more than 30 kids in one classroom, teachers buying their own material, all of these little problems that happens all the time in the minority community, especially in the Latino. I think when I saw that and when I talked to the parents, my kids go to CPS, and unfortunately they're very good school, but still they have their own problems. They have loses a lot of programs and art classes and even sport classes. They don't have the same amount of instructors, and that's sad. And that's one of the reasons too that I would like to be in Congress, because I would like to bring not only the federal monies available to bring and help the communities in certain programs wherever it's available, because so far Luis hasn't done anything at all. Because everything is about immigration.
What do you? I mean, there's been a lot of controversy regarding charter schools, particularly the UNO charter schools.
Yeah.
But also too this specter that's being led in part by Latino families for more choices in education. Stop sending money to central bureaucracies and invest directly in families to give them the resources that provide choice.
Well, if you're mentioning the charter schools, I'm not a big fan of charter schools myself. I understand that they are a choice, they're an option, but I don't think that charter is the solution for the community. I truly believe
what
that.
Is?
Well, is continue funding the schools properly, appropriate funds for all the schools, make it equal for everybody. And I know this is pretty much a city and a state business, but as a congressman, I would like to be a moral supporter for the creation of better funds, better funding for the CPS.
What about? I had this idea a few years ago. Let me run it by you. The Department of Education, kind of about $45–50 billion. What about taking some of that money? We have kind of no idea where it goes. I know there's these race to the top grants and so forth, and setting that aside for scholarships for disadvantaged children in the worst performing schools or school systems, schools that, for example, have less than a 75% graduation rate and with a high poverty rate based on free or reduced school lunches, that aren't getting the job done, even though spending per pupil is going like this over the last 20 years, and providing scholarship dollars for those families, making scholarship dollars available the way that we made scholarship dollars available to poor, largely African-American children in D.C. As an overlay to say, look, if the city and the state isn't getting the job done in the 4th District, then here's something the federal government can do. It can provide a pool of money for those that are discriminated against based
Right.
on their household income and their address, and provide those parents that want to access those dollars and those kids that want to take a chance to go somewhere else can provide them a way out. What
Oh,
about that?
absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. Then, and once I become a congressman, I will look into all of those choices, options that are for better and improving the education system in our state, but mostly in the 4th district, which is lacking for a long time. But you know what?
Go ahead.
In the same token, people is talking to me all the time about property taxes. That's another issue that
a huge
they
issue.
really care for.
I'm happy to complain to you about my property
And I
taxes.
said to them, you know what, this is a city issue and a state issue, but as a congressman, I will be morally supporting you. I will talk about it. I will not be siding with the mayor or siding with the people who is raising your taxes. I will try to find solutions. And listen, for 22 years, we have this guy who has done nothing at all, not even talking about the issue. One of the issues, like, for
Not even
example,
paying property taxes
Yeah.
for part of that time when his property was off the rolls thanks to John Cass's investigative work. We found that out.
One of the major complaints also that people has is like the 606, especially Latino people who
Yeah.
live in this area for many years, and now they're being ousted because the property taxes too. Because if
606,
you
the
live
bike path.
Yeah, if you live next to this road, I mean, your property taxes are like humongous because all the homes are very, very expensive now. So that's another complaint that has to do with the city and the state. But they see me as a congressman and say, like, well, what are you going to do about it? I was like, well, I don't know what can I do about it, but at least I will look into it and support you.
Well, the
and
other thing,
all
I mean,
so that's.
But the thing is, this belies these lines that we draw. Well, that's a federal issue, and he's a congressman, and this is a state issue, and he's a alderman. I mean, a state legislator, and this is a city issue. He's an alderman.
Right.
The point is, all these guys get together.
Exactly.
So, I mean, the idea that Luis Gutierrez isn't involved in city policy and state policy is laughable. Of course he is, right? Of course he is. He doesn't limit himself to just federal issues, right?
Right.
So when you talk about property taxes, or when you talk about the power structure here, you talk about K through 12 education here, Luis Gutierrez has blood on his hands. Is that a fair argument?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So let me ask you a question just about the campaign and about the coverage of the campaign now that you're on the other side of it. After being in media for 20 years,
Right.
now you're a candidate fighting for media
Almost there.
coverage, right?
Yes.
And so I just wonder what you think about the Chicago press corps, the English press corps, the Spanish media press corps, and do you think the media in this city has been complicit in the stasis that we have in terms of the same people or the same power structure shuffling the deck with different names but the same approach? Gutierrez being there for 22 years is a prime example of that.
Sure.
How much blame does the media deserve for what has become of Chicago and the state of Illinois?
Well, one of the major issues that I'm very disappointed now is reading about how Chicago Tribune and sometimes even Crane is complaining about Rahm, right? But they supported him. They complain about Rauner, but they supported him too. So the dynamic is really, really weird because you're like, well, if you stay with this guy and you support him and you really tell people, vote for this guy, because I believe, people listen to you and they're gonna vote for whoever you tell them. That's the power of radio. That's your responsibility. That's a responsibility. And I know what a microphone does. I know I had the power of the microphone for many years. And I guess you have to be responsible. Every time I had a politician on my show, I always called both parts, whoever wanted to come. That's fine. Luis never came to my show after I started grilling him with big questions, of course. And I understand we have a big responsibility. You're asking me if I think it's what's happening, the dynamic. I think we need to start asking, especially the Latino community and the immigrant community in the 4th district, we need to be more aware of what's happening.
Do you think but I guess my point is, do you think the media gets captured by the politicians they cover? Because I'm not going to say a bad word about Rahm because I want access.
Right.
I'm not going to say a bad word about this politician or that politician because I still want access, or because I'm a friend, or because I support their political agenda. Either way, but mostly in this city, of course, we're talking about the Democrats.
I'm not sure so much in the English market, but in the Latino market, I will say that, there is a couple of people like that. But mostly other people, they don't have a lot of support, and we don't have a lot of talk shows. We don't have a lot of I mean, all newspaper is the only paper that we have. We have La Raza.
Yeah,
and
right.
they don't do a lot of investigative reporting. They just pretty much translate from English to Spanish and on most of the occasions. And also there is this fascination with stories from Mexico, Central America, and South America, because we're also longing for hearing the news from our countries.
Sure.
I mean, how can you understand that Univision is 24 hours now, Chapo, Chapo, Chapo?
Right.
How can you? It's just unbelievable. It's very shameful. I mean, I feel embarrassed when I turn on Univision because I think everybody thinks that we're all drug dealers. You know, it's like
I feel embarrassed that Sean Penn is a natural-born citizen. So, we share some embarrassments.
Unbelievable. Well, it's not the first time he does that. Remember, he went and visited Hugo Chavez, right?
Good buddies.
Or something like shake hands and have drinks.
That's what happens in a free country. You're allowed to be an idiot here.
Right. So yeah, absolutely. We need changes. I don't particularly know in the English media who will be that person you're talking about, but
and how have you fared as a member of the Fourth Estate and now a political candidate? How are your former colleagues treating you?
Oh my God, that's a great question too. Then listen, when I did like this soft launch of my campaign, I figured everybody's gonna be making fun of me. Everybody was gonna be like calling me and telling me don't do it or something. No, it's been an amazing trip since the very beginning. People is tired of him, and just like in the same politicians, good thing you're doing this. I'm with you. People in the media has been telling me that too. Great. Would you say something? No, I wouldn't say that.
Right.
But they are in the same position too. So they're very excited. Also, they know me. They know my background. They know that I have a lot of credibility and transparency. They know my family. They know everything I did for the community. So that helps a lot. And they see that I'm serious. Once I did my speech, my announcement, is when I saw all this English media, ABC, CBS, and all that. I was like, wow! And again, all the questioning that I've been responding kind of indicates me that they are fed up too.
Yeah.
The same guy. That is like good. Thank you for the interview, Javier. Good job.
Well, I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I'm not so sure how much this helps you, but I'm willing to say it out loud. I'm fed up with Luis Gutierrez. And so I wish you luck. Javier Salas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Against the Current. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure to be here then. Good to see you again.